Welcome to the party. Enough talk. It's showtime.
Hello and welcome to Bags of Action. My name's Steve, my co-host is Pete.
Hello.
This is a special episode where we're going to be talking about Avengers Endgame and possibly Infinity War as well. So we're going to be spoiling both films. If you have not seen it, this is our full spoilery review. You have been warned.
Yeah, you probably need to have seen 22 films to really appreciate this podcast.
At least, yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, so where should we? I was just going to kind of recap, I guess, not on 22 films.
Go for it, yeah.
Yeah. We'll be here for a while. It's going to be a very long episode. Just on, I guess, the people involved, because I think Marvel used lots of different writers and directors early in the kind of cinematic universe.
Yes.
And they obviously relied a lot on like a brain trust from the comics. But I'd say kind of in the later phases, they've shifted, particularly on the key films, to this two pairings, a pair of directors and a pair of writers. So this is directed by the Russo brothers, Anthony and Joe, I believe.
Yes.
They've also done Captain America Winter Soldier, which I know we both like a great deal. Mm-hmm. And then they've gone on to do Captain America Civil War, and then they've done the two films here, Avengers Infinity War and now Endgame. And consistency-wise, they're both written by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely. Mm-hmm. They wrote all those films that the Russo brothers directed. They also did rewrites, I found it the other day, on Thor the Dark World.
Right.
So I rewatched that recently, and there's some bits in that I really didn't like, but there's some really good character moments. And you can almost, if you watch it again, you can kind of go, yeah, that's the bits that they probably did.
Right.
Because they're so strong on character. But they also, they were showrunners on Agent Carter as well.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they created that and wrote a lot of the episodes. So they are entrenched in the Marvel world, which I think is good because I think that consistency has really helped.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we should say that this, although this film is, the Endgame is many things, it's about many, many, many things. Really, underneath it all, it was an end for the main Avengers in various ways. Not necessarily killing them off, not necessarily, but a way for them to step aside or step out of the spotlight so that going forward, it's a new generation, more or less, with new people. So there is quite a lot of focus on them in Infinity War and more so in Endgame. And I've seen some complaints about that. But it's like, well, it was always their story, really. And going forward, you'll get more time with the other characters because it's their story going forward. It's not about Captain America, Thor.
I completely agree. I think the other thing that people forget is when this was being filmed, Black Panther and Captain Marvel hadn't actually come out yet. Mm. So they didn't know. Obviously, they've both been really successful, but they didn't have a clue whether they would be or not.
No.
And I think my biggest concern, because you haven't seen Captain Marvel, have you?
No, but I know a lot about it, so you feel free to spoil it.
Yeah. So having watched that, and it was one of those films, I watched it twice. First time I wasn't 100% sure about it because it's a new character being kind of that we supposed to have been always around, but we didn't know, which when you've seen so many films is quite hard to get your head around. But the second time I preferred it. But my biggest fear going into this film was that Captain Marvel was going to basically come in so powerful and would just completely save the day.
Yes.
And I think they knew that because I thought it was really clever. As I said, we are going to spoil it. At the start of the film, so she's the person who basically gets Tony down from space when it all seems lost from the end of Infinity War. And when that happened, I thought, they're doing exactly what I didn't want them to do. There's a problem created for the characters that have been in loads of films, and then a character that's been kind of retconned into the story is now going to be the one that can do anything. I thought, but they didn't. It was kind of, she's used when she's needed. She's there at the start to get Tony, and she's there at the end when they need her. But she goes off and saves the other planet. So I think it was consistent for the character, but it did kind of moving some of the other players off the board, which obviously happened at the end of Infinity War anyway. Yeah. So you could focus on the core Avengers. They managed to do an awful lot in this film anyway. But if you'd had a much larger cast again, I think it would have been impossible. I think it would have unraveled. Whereas here, the balance I think was spot on personally. Like my daughter said, there wasn't enough Captain Marvel, but she's 12 and has only recently seen them. And, to her, it's a strong female character, so she wanted to see more of her. But then I explained to her, obviously, they are going to carry on with these films because they make like $2 billion in a day. So it's not like this is the end. It's the end, like you said, it's the end for kind of the original characters. And I think watching this film, you suddenly start to notice that some of the actors they're really not that young anymore. And it's a bit different. Obviously, in the comics, they don't age, and the stories never quite end. So I think as a lifelong kind of comics reader and a Marvel reader, it was just fascinating to me to actually see the end of people's stories for once.
Yeah, because we've said this at Marvel and DC, they have to keep the characters within this permanent second act. Even though things go forward, they then kind of reset to a certain degree because the characters are IP and the IP doesn't want to go away, and therefore you can't ever get rid of Bruce Wayne as Batman and you can't get rid of Tony Stark as Iron Man. It always comes back at some point. It'll go off to someone else. The Shield will go to someone else with Cap, but it always goes back to Steve Rogers. So in this case, it was a way to retire in various forms the original Avengers and then the new generation take on the mantle going forward. So that was one of my fears as well, as you said, that she would come in and just be Mighty Mouse and save the day. And thankfully they didn't do that. And I've seen some complaints from some people saying there weren't enough screen time for the female characters, but given what we've just said, that's one of the reasons why. And a lot of them, well, some of them were dead. It's like I didn't get enough screen time with Black Panther. Well, he was dead for half of the film, and he's been in. This will be the third film, and he wasn't really in much of it. And he was in, obviously, Civil War, and then, fourth film.
Exactly.
Yeah, Black Panther, the fourth film.
Yeah, and maybe it's tougher for the general cinema audience, but if you've read Avengers comics for years, okay, the next team will have Captain Marvel, Spider-Man, Black Panther, and they are ushering in a new era, and probably new characters will come through as well, because there's like other films coming, like Shang-Chi film is coming, I believe. Yep. So it's exactly what the Avengers have always done. I guess the difference is, and like you said, there's been the opportunity to kind of reset. They can change the team and then a year later put it back to the old team. But with actors, unless they start doing everything in CG, they haven't got that. So they've got to build a legacy. And I think this was like the perfect kind of way to pass the baton over and establish where it goes, really. And I think as well, they probably, to a certain extent, acknowledge the fact that female characters didn't get as much screen time. There's a bit near the end in the final battle where it's just almost like
it's almost like very forced.
It did. I did think it felt very forced, but then thinking of kind of I watched it with my daughter, who just turned up to me and went, "Girl power," and I thought it is contrived. It is contrived. It did take me out of the story a bit, but if it's kind of a slightly knowing kind of, don't worry, there's plenty of these characters ready for the next phase, I think I'm kind of okay with that. But I get your point. Again, it's a bit like Captain Marvel. My take on this film, I've seen it twice. My take on it the second time was quite different from the first time.
Right. Because
the first time, I was so surprised by where the story went that I didn't really get my head around it. So I came home from it, and my wife was like, "What do you think of the film?" I said, "This is the next day," because I said went to the midnight screening. I said, "Oh yeah, it's pretty good." And she went, "What do you mean it's pretty good?" It's like, you've been waiting your whole life for this film, and you're saying it's pretty good. I said, "Well, and then I thought about it more, and then I went to see it a second time, and I'm not going to jump to scores, obviously, just yet, but I think I'll tell you exactly what happened. So I went in there, and in my head, I had this film mapped out from having seen all the other films, read comics all my life, watched Infinity War. I had a very clear vision in my head with some deviation of kind of where they would take the story, what kind of story it would be. Right. And within 20 minutes, they ripped that out.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think was very deliberate. It was a big bait and switch. So when, again, we're spoiling, but when Thor went for the head with Thanos, now I'm not, me well enough to know that we're both, would be in the cinema, silence. Silence is key in the cinema. Don't make a fuss. Don't make a noise. We're not American.
Code.
Yeah, but sometimes you can get like vocal spasms.
Yep.
So at the point that Thor cut his head off, I shouted, "You what?" at the top of my voice, and people kind of looked around, and I just like looked back at the floor. But it was, because I was so like, oh, it's that. And I always have hated time jumps in fiction. I've stopped watching. Walking Dead gave me an out because they jumped forward a certain number of years recently on a TV show, and I was like, do you know what? Some of the characters are gone. You've jumped forward. That's a good point for me to step off.
Yeah.
But so I think that's what happened. So first viewing, I was so taken aback, and then so many things kept happening I wasn't expecting that I couldn't quite get my head around it. But the second viewing, totally different, because I mean, it almost feels like a 12-issue miniseries of a comic more than a traditional movie.
Yeah, so
because
Endgame is so very, very different. Because originally it was going to be Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2 with the names. And then they changed that and said it's going to be Infinity War. And then we finally found out this was called Endgame. And I remember I've watched some interviews recently with the Russo brothers and the writers. And they said, this is a very different film. That's one of the reasons we changed the name. But also, if you come in, you will realise pretty quick that it is not what you expected, or is it the same kind of film? As you said, 25 minutes into it, they've found Thanos and they've killed him, and you go, hooray! And then they go, actually, there's no way to do anything.
Yeah, or you shout, you what, at the top of your voice, and then look.
To be fair, there were some moments where I did actually vocalise during this film.
There was
slightly embarrassed to say, but it did.
I imagine they're the same ones. Our whole screening clapped when Steve got the hammer, and the whole screening shouted yes when he said "Avengers Assemble."
There was also a small child in the screen that I saw, and when Thanos clicked his fingers and it didn't work, the kid went, "Ha ha, didn't work," which slightly spoiled the moment for me. But not too much. But anyway, yes, I just kind of laughed at that point. But yes, there was lots of kind of vocalizations. I just couldn't help it because on that first screening, I didn't see any of it coming. I didn't know what was going to happen. But yeah, this film, very, very different. Not was I anticipating. 20 minutes in is kind of where you think the film was going to end. And then suddenly you're like, there's no way to undo it. And I thought, no, he didn't really destroy the stones. No. No, he did. And you're like, oh, what? Now what the heck do we do? And that was such a kick in the balls. And then it shows you the impact and the fallout on everything.
But it's so good. I think, we're both people that have watched and read a lot of stories.
Yep.
And we're both people that write ourselves. So for somebody to make a 20-second film in a series, kind of, and to actually make you go, ooh, I have literally no idea what's coming next, is genius. I think from the writing and directing, it's like, I think had it still been Infinity War Part 2, I don't think it would have had the same kind of magic that this had. Yeah.
The other thing, as you said about the timing wise and the filming, is that remember the majority of this film, barring reshoots, which were even done as late as January this year, were done together. It was done back to back over a 12-month period. And so they, as you said, they didn't know how Black Panther would be received. They didn't know how Captain Marvel would be received. So they had to kind of hedge their bets on that thing. But also it's probably the biggest filming thing that anybody has ever done. Not just the fact that it's two films back to back, but then they have to work on editing them and post for months with all of the CGI and everything. So it's just the fact that they got them out in a year and then wasn't it like less than a year later?
It was almost. I watched it. I think I watched them. My second viewing of the film was exactly a year after my second viewing of it the first time. Right. So yeah, it's pretty much a year, exactly a year.
Which is incredible. The feat that it took them to pull it off. And I watched an interview with Kevin Feige, and they said, when did you start to plan this? And they said, well, very, very loosely, about 5 years ago. And it was around the time that when I think it was even before Civil War. It was somewhere around there. They were talking about it and started planting seeds and working stuff out. And then they were working out, okay, what do we do? And how do we get to there? And what beats do we need to have? And all this kind of stuff.
Well, I think that the writers here probably paid. I listened to a really good podcast that you sent me actually with them, and they talked about how they were the ones who said, "Let's do Hydra. You've built up S.H.I.E.L.D. Let's pull it down." Which I always thought must come from inside Marvel, And I think at that point they were like, "Oh, what else do you want to do?" Because again, I rewatched Thor: The Dark World last week, and because my rest of my family hadn't seen it, and the end credit scene of that is about Infinity Stones.
Yes.
And you just think, so I think a lot of this is like they've got them on board. They were willing to kind of come outside, still be influenced obviously by the comics, but take it in a slightly different direction. And I think suddenly anything was possible, really. So I think it's that latter phases. But also in that same interview, they said that on each of these films, they've had less and less time each time.
Yes.
They had a lot long, twice as long probably, to work up the script for Winter Soldier than they did for this. And you think, again, having watched it a second time, you go, there's so many. I've never seen a film with so many payoffs, and they're not just payoffs from within the film. They're managing to do payoffs within the film, payoffs scene to scene, but also payoffs from films from like 12 years ago in one film, and it never feels forced.
No.
I don't think. So yeah, no, it's a feat of filmmaking on many levels.
So should we talk about some of the payoffs then in this film? Because the interview I saw last night was the Russo brothers talking through some of their various moments.
Yeah, I've got kind of in order to me to remember, because I'm not as young as I once was, like many of the Avengers, maybe it's time for me to retire. I just kind of went through character by character, trying to work out kind of where they'd been taken in this movie.
So let's start with Cap. So the Russo brothers said when they first brought Cap on, when they first started working on a Winter Soldier with him, there was, he's this strong character. He starts off as pretty unbreakable and nothing can really touch him. And then you go, okay, so we now need to find a chink in his armor and break him down. So they took away his trust of authority. They took away, that he's always relied on. And S.H.I.E.L.D. then became corrupted by Hydra. You took away his friends and it left him with very little. And then he has to kind of rebuild himself. He has to find a way forward. And it's that thing of, in Endgame, when he meets the younger version of himself, who says, I could do this all day. And Cap's like, ugh. He's a bit older, he's a bit wiser, he's also a bit more grey because he's done things that perhaps the younger version of himself who's a bit more stiff wouldn't. And so he almost kind of, I think he just sort of says something like, yeah, or something like that, because he's like, yeah, I get it, but I'm not just about that anymore.
Yeah, and I like that because I remember when I watched the first Avengers film, I was a bit like, oh, I like Captain America, but he's annoying me a bit in this film. And I think it is that kind of straight down the middle, kind of stoic, kind of unmovableness about him. And the reasons that kind of Tony gets irritated by him started to seep through to me as in the audience. But then in his own films, so his arc is actually quite subtle. But here you suddenly realise, like you say, he's kind of adapted to the age that he's in now.
Yep.
What's your thought on because obviously I've heard two different theories on him with the hammer. So one was because of the reasons you've just said, he's gone through these changes and he's reached a point where he's worthy.
Yeah.
The other theory, because I guess the only person up to now who's been able to pick up the hammer has been the Vision.
Yep.
But Steve has moved it slightly in one of the films before.
So this is an Age of Ultron. Here's the thing that the Russos said, but they didn't give definite proof. It was just a kind of thing of what they said it could have gone. So in Age of Ultron, they all attempt to pick up the hammer. And this is a thing they said they wanted to revisit that because that was one of the moments that they just kept talking about and everyone kept talking about, that they all try and lift up the hammer. It doesn't work. And then Cap goes and he seems to move it to the point where Thor is about to shit himself. And there are two theories on this point. One, Cap isn't worthy, but he's almost worthy, and that's why it moved. Yeah. And two, he could move it, but he didn't. Because one, he didn't want it, and two, he didn't want to embarrass Thor or do any of that, so he didn't actually pick it up. Now, I kind of hope it's the second of those. I don't know. Yes, I'd like to believe it's the second one, but I think it's the first one. I think it's the fact that he hasn't gone through his crucible yet. He hasn't been stripped down of everything, because it's not until it's Civil War, isn't it, when Peggy dies?
Yeah.
And that's when he loses kind of everything. He's lost so much up to that point. The only thing he's got left is Bucky, and he fights so hard for his friend to keep him. And then at the end, he just sort of says, the two of them have to fight Tony because that's the only thing he's got left. He's already gone against the system and S.H.I.E.L.D. and taking them down. And so I think it's a stripping away of things with him to find out who he is when he doesn't have someone in charge to tell him what to do, and he has to be his own man.
Yeah, and I think as well, him and Tony found a middle ground.
They go the opposite way. This is the thing.
Yeah.
Because we'll come on to Tony's, but they start at very different points and cross over and then go different ways again. So I think Cap couldn't pick it up then. I think he was nearly worthy. That's my theory.
But but then Thor looks up and goes, "I knew it." That's what for me was like. Well,
he suspected Cap was nearly worthy because he saw that Cap moved it. I think that's what it was. He was crapping himself that this human is almost that pure, whereas the machine did it because he was brand new and had no kind of weight of conscience. He had no negative thoughts. He was just come out the machine freshly pressed. That's why Vision could do it, because his intentions were utterly pure. And I think Cap was moving towards a kind of closer version of that. But yes, when Cap lifted up the hammer, I made a lot of noise in the cinema at that point. Come on! I think I shouted. And I wasn't the only one.
And I think that's the thing, because people have talked about how these films have kind of replaced the action movies that we talk about on the show a lot. Part of me's been like, well, have they? Then I watched this and I thought, do you know what? This is giving me the exact same rush that there's characters I care about. They're fighting against evil, and it's amazing when they triumph. So it does kind of tick the same kind of endorphin moments that you get from a traditional action movie, I guess. There's the fight sequence where Cap fights himself is amazing.
Yes,
really amazing. Close combat stuff, and it's the fact is him fighting himself is just beautifully done.
Shielding the shield again, but that was brilliant. Cap's arc was brilliant. The whole thing, from start to finish, I loved it, and I loved how it ended for him as well.
Me too.
So what they've said is, given what Tilda Swinton's character, the Ancient One, said, you can't change stuff because you create new timelines and all this blah, blah, blah. So what they've said is basically Cap returned the stones but found a way to go and live with Peg in another timeline.
Okay.
And then until he became really, really old, and then he crossed back to the current one to see them and pass on the shield. So it isn't, because she said if you go back and do it, it won't change the present. So it hasn't changed. He's gone somewhere else, and he's had the life that he always wanted with the greatest love of his life, which was Peggy Carter.
And that kind of ties in. I don't know if you've seen the most recent Spider-Man trailer.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so I don't think I'll spoil that because people may have seen Endgame but not watched that. But there's things in there which kind of allude to that a little bit as well.
So I loved it. I loved that moment, that right at the end. And the story of Anthony Mackie didn't know, but Chris did. And he was over at Chris's house and they're like watching football. And he goes, so what do you think? And Anthony Mackie's like, what do you mean? He goes, you don't know? He goes, no, you don't know. And he runs out the room and comes back in with a script and shoves it in his hand and goes, read it. And he read it, and they were laughing and crying and celebrating. And then they filmed that moment on set, and he gives him the shield, and they said, cut, and Chris Evans cries, Anthony Mackie cries, the Russo brothers cry. They go, right, okay, we've got to do it again. They do it again, and they all cry again. Because they said there's
another theory here, which I'd heard on a podcast between watching it the first and second time, and I'm still not sure. Do you think Bucky knew what Cap was going to do?
Yes.
Okay.
The moment that he saw Peggy when he went to 1970, if he hadn't seen her, he probably wouldn't have done it. But I think that Bucky knows he's not worthy of the shield because in the Marvel film universe, he still has done a lot of bad things. He's done some atonement and he's trying to get better, but for all intents and purposes, people still think of him as a guy who was an assassin for 70 years.
Still killed Tony's parents.
Yeah, he's still done a lot of very bad things. And yes, he is trying to make amends, but he's currently not there yet. Whereas Sam, Falcon character, in the film, he's very close to Cap in some ways. The fact that He's got great heart. He works with veterans. He's extremely loyal and patriotic. They're cut very close on the same cloth. The fact that Steve was born, 80 years ago, and then, 80 years later, you've got this guy who's a modern soldier and yet still has all of the same principles. And that's why they work so well together in The Winter Soldier, I think. It just made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit torn because I think the Falcon is a good character in his own right.
Yes.
And I think having him become Cap instead... But I don't know. There's the TV show, which, unless they were tricking us, is called...
No, it is. It's still called...
Winter Soldier and
Falcon.
And the Falcon.
Yep.
So maybe he doesn't. Maybe he decides not to do it, or maybe I don't know.
It's him exploring becoming Cap and what it means to be a modern Captain America, and the fact that they've all said this. Well, Anthony Mackie, the Russos, the fact that he's black is a big thing. Anthony Mackie said, he's read comics his entire life as well, and the two things he always wanted to be when he was an actor was a cowboy and a superhero, and now he's got to do both. And the fact that he said, Chris Evans is giving me the shield as well as Captain America giving the Falcon the shield. And he said that moment is so powerful for him. That's one of the reasons they all got so emotional as well. So it's a great end cap for Chris Evans' story as Captain America. And he isn't coming back. They've said it. The Russos have said it. So what if it's that? And he goes, no, I think Chris is happy with how it's ended. He wants to go on and do other things, and I don't blame him. I wouldn't want him to come back.
I think he's probably going to direct more because he's done a little bit of that. And, but I think a lot of them have managed to do other projects. He's been majority in these films, isn't he? He's probably done...
He's done other bits and films here and there.
Yeah, but it feels like the right time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if you're going to end it, then this is the way to do it. I loved as well the throwback to Winter Soldier. So when he first meets the Falcon, he's like,
on your left.
And that's what he says when he comes back through the portal.
Through the portal. It's perfect.
It's like, again, it's like you. I don't know why I don't find it all contrived. There's a part of me that should be like, well, all these lines just keep getting repeated and everyone knows how that works, but it doesn't.
No,
it works so well.
It's a perfect callback.
Because it's all callbacks.
Yeah.
And again, not being rude to kind of films from years ago, maybe with the exception of Christopher Reeve, but they've put proper actors in these films, which really helps.
True.
Because there's some lines that could be the cheesiest thing you've ever heard, but delivered by people who've got proper acting chops. And like the scene of the funeral made me just go, bloody hell, everyone has been in these films.
And some of them didn't know. Some of the actors. So Tom Holland was up.
Yeah, we know why that is though, because he's spoiled two of the films online, so they only give him his bits of the script.
Yeah, but like all of them didn't know. So in the script, all it said it was called The Wedding. So no one really knew what they were doing that day and what they were filming. They just knew that it was called The Wedding. So they had to kind of marshal everybody in. They ran it through with stand-ins for the camera about 4 or 5 times to get it all going. So they knew, how we'd move around, how we do it. And then they brought everybody in. And Tom Holland goes up to one of the Russos and goes, Is that Michelle Pfeiffer? Because he didn't know that she'd been in Ant-Man and the Wasp. He's like, Is that her? Yeah, that's her. Oh my God, it's Michelle Pfeiffer. So it was just, that took a long time to organise and then film, but it worked. It worked beautifully.
And did you know, again, we are jumping all over the place, but did you know, I didn't know who the young teenage boy was at the funeral, but someone told me after I saw it the first time.
He was the kid from Iron Man 3, wasn't he? Yeah, I was told that later as well.
Because I watched that, I was like, who the hell? I've watched all these films. I know this universe. Who is that boy? It really irritated me. I was like, it must be, and I went through everything. Like, is it not Quicksilver? He died. Yeah. And all these things, like all these different possibilities. And then I was at a comic signing actually, and someone said, "Oh no," and I was like, "Of course it is. Of course it is.
Of course it is." The engineer, the kid in the engineer. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on from Cap. Pick someone else. Who else then do you want to go for?
Let's go with Hawkeye.
Yeah, it's not too. So his transformation into Ronin. A lot of people they never call him Ronin. It's never said in the film, but obviously if you read the comics, we know that that's who the character becomes when he throws away the bow, essentially, and becomes this vicious killer dressed in black and gold with the sword. He loses his family, which was horrible at the start. I never saw that coming.
No, and I think Hawkeye's been really underserved in these films overall, and the character is a weird hybrid of the original Clint from the comics, bits of Hawkeye, kind of the Matt Fraction run in the comics, and something else.
Yeah,
and he's almost become a bit of a joke. And even Jeremy Renner's been on like chat shows doing songs about how he's the lamest Avenger and stuff. And you just think. So I was really pleased, and he wasn't in. Him and Ant-Man, I guess, were the two characters that weren't in Infinity War, and then got key roles here. And I thought this was the first time that I really felt it was his best film yet, I think, as a character and as a performer.
Yeah, it's really dark, the beginning of the character's arc, when been out killing people and basically hunting down criminals because they still exist in the world despite the fact that half the population's gone. And so he's like, well, someone still has to do it because they think they can get away with it. And he's there to be like, no, you can't. And he goes around chopping heads and killing people.
It's clever as well. Again, obviously, like you said, we know about Ronin from the comics, but from, I think, again, the casual audience perspective, he's the guy who became like the family man, and became the lead. Like, do you know what? I don't need this heroic thing because I've actually got this real life. And so obviously his loss is very different from everyone else because he literally has got no idea what's going on. There's a beautiful moment, say, to open the film of him teaching his daughter to use the bow and arrow. And then his whole family literally just disappears in front of his eyes, and he's got no idea why.
All of them go. That's what's so horrible about it. Not even just one of them survives. No. It's everybody. And
it's a beautiful way to start the film because obviously the Infinity War ended with that happening to lots of people. But you, in a way, like it's only been a year, but we've all kind of, okay, that's happened. What's going to happen now? But you forget that there are people that, because it literally starts, yes, there was a time jump, but essentially that's the same. That moment could have been at the end of Infinity War.
Yeah,
and I think it's much more powerful here because it's one of him and Ant-Man. But the fact that they're two characters you didn't see, and then you get to find out quite early on, I think is really I think it would affect you to the extent you'd probably go off and be a vigilante and having sword fights in the street.
And
he gets some great action moments finally because of that as well.
Oh, yeah. It works really well. We get to see his arc with obviously the growing friendship and possibly something else with him and Black Widow that's always sort of been there.
I don't know. They've known each other the longest, haven't they? Because they were both kind of agents together.
And they fought each other at one point, didn't they? When the opposite sides and things.
But I don't see it like that. It's a bit. I mean, I don't know. There's a Game of Thrones thing that's really irritated me this season, similarly. But I just see it as a platonic friendship because, especially when the sacrifice is made, I think it's more about they understand each other regardless of gender. They both have done. She's always talked about the red in her ledger and about the fact they've done such terrible things. But now they can relate to each other more than anyone else because he's now gone off and done terrible things too.
Yep.
So I think the bond between them is more about, these are everyone else is like a hero. They're the two anti-heroes or the people that have, and they don't get to know Bucky very well, but they've both done these bad things. And I think they both need closure, but they need different closure. Hers is just, I think, sacrificing herself, which is her redemption. I know we're jumping onto her. His is having a family. And I think between them, they obviously they don't agree over who should go with the Soul Stone, but I think that's for me. I have maybe I'm wrong, but I've not seen it as a romantic thing at all. I just seen it as
you could be right.
Like brothers in arms thing, really.
Yeah. Moment with the Soul Stone is painful. It's difficult, and earlier we've seen her unable to kind of give up doing it and give up working because Cap says, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Well, someone's got to do it," because she hasn't really got anything else, and so she's working with talking to the people around the world, whether it's War Machine or Rocket or Captain Marvel, and they're still trying to help people, even though there's half the population that there was before. This, as you said, criminals we've seen with Ronan going out and killing them, and
she's kind of broken, but still doing it. Like you say, there's nothing else for her to do, which I think, and she needs them to be brought back. She needs to think it was worth something.
Yes.
I think in many ways, she's the driving force. Yeah. Ant-Man comes up with the initial plan. You can't do that plan without Bruce and certainly without Tony.
Yep.
But she's the one who kind of keeps driving them forward. to actually keep going.
Yeah.
Which I think made her loss more powerful. It's a bit annoying in a way that like her and Gamora are the two people that happened to, and they're both kind of female characters, which I can understand if people are looking at this and going, well, the female characters don't get much screen time and two of them die. I get that, but it did make, if you take the gender thing out of it completely and just think of it as a character, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So do you want to do Thor or Hulk? Because there's not a lot with Hulk. There's some, but not a lot.
No, yeah, Hulk's arc is Hulk's arc in my head happened off screen.
Yeah.
In the 5-year jump. There's another thing I think happened in that 5-year jump, actually, because I heard a couple of people have said, oh, why did Tony and Steve kind of forgive each other so quickly? It's like, well, it didn't happen quickly. It happened over 5 years, and you don't have to see someone to forgive them.
No. Because
at the start of the film, there's still an issue between them, and Tony in particular is very angry. One of the many times they keep making you think he's going to die early in the film. But when they get back together, it's almost like, do you know what? I've got a family now. My priorities have changed. I get where you were coming, but you don't need to say it. The fact that they just kind of, and he just says he says at the start, I don't trust you. And then later, I think Cap says to Tony, I trust you back. So it's almost like it's that I thought was really subtle. But anyway, sorry. But
Hulk.
That brings it to the Hulk. Similar thing, though, to me. He's become Professor Hulk, which I really wasn't expecting.
No.
He's done that off camera. He's found the balance between the light and the dark, really. You know, previously, Natasha had to keep saying the sun's going down.
Yep.
But he doesn't need that anymore.
No. So he said he was treating Hulk like a disease, but in fact he was the cure because he combined the two best parts together. Now, we know that there's going to be a Hulk and She-Hulk TV series with Ruffalo. So, what they've also said is, you know how Thanos used the glove twice, and after he used it the first time, he had damaged his arm, but he was still able to kind of repair the wound in his chest so that he didn't die. And then when he used it a second time, you see him, when they catch up with him at the start of the film, it's kind of, his left arm's really shriveled and damaged because he used it twice, and it nearly killed him. So what they've said is, Hulk has used the gauntlet, and he has his arm in a sling at the end. It's not irreversible, but it is severe damage.
Okay.
So it's a case of, I think he's going to be trying to work out how to fix that and cure that. And at some point, there's going to be a blood transfusion. Or maybe his cousin gets sick and blah, blah, blah. And then, oh, look, now she's turned into Jen Walters the She-Hulk. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that's how, something like that. And that's how she'll end up with some of his blood and then blah, blah, blah. But... So, yes, they've said... So, the Hulk basically, as you said, most of it happens off-screen. The start of Endgame, he lost. Hulk wouldn't come out. Banner had to do it by himself to prove that you don't need to be big and strong to do it. You can use your smarts to win, and he did. And then there's that great moment where they time travel back. And he goes, they say to him, don't forget to hit a few things. And he goes, and he kind of pushes the car slightly. It just made me laugh so much that he's become something so different from the savage beast that he just kind of, all right, and poke some stuff to try and look like he's the Hulk.
As someone who relates a great deal to the Hulk, I have a bobblehead of the Hulk sat in front of me right now, and a big picture of him on the wall with the beast written underneath it. I could do with becoming Professor Hulk at some point in my life.
Okay, we can work on that.
to find that balance.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on because time's getting on.
No, but I mean, he gets very angry when Natasha dies because I thought a little bit. Well, they were really close, and they to me were more romantically.
They were.
But I don't know. Yeah, but when he finds out she's definitely dead and he throws the bench across the lake, it was a good moment.
Yeah. So it's still there if he needs it, but it's. Do you
want to go
Thor?
Shall we go? We've got left. Yeah, shall we go Thor?
And then we'll finish with Tony.
Yeah, because I guess Ant-Man isn't from the original ones. Yeah, okay.
Well, I think he'll be in it again going forward.
Yeah.
There's not as much of an arc for Ant-Man. There's the great stuff with his daughter, which is really touching and family.
Yeah, I suppose originally he was like the underdog. He was a thief and didn't really think he could offer much to the world. And then he saves the world. And I guess, everyone else wears Ant-Man helmets. That must make you happy.
It's great. Yeah. Okay, so
cool. Let's do those two.
He won this second. So the first time in Endgame, he didn't go for the head. He lost his best friend. He lost his brother. He lost a load of his people, and they're seemingly most of them are dead when Thanos blows up the ship. He's lost an eye already to his sister. His father's dead. He's got nothing.
His mother's dead. Yeah.
And then Thanos just casts him off, and then, he rebuilds himself at the end of Endgame, creates the perfect weapons, and still doesn't win. They still lose, and that hits him really deeply, and he becomes an alcoholic gamer who sits around getting fat.
Which, when that first happened, I thought, okay, you've lent massively into the Ragnarok comedy side, but they did it in order to give him pathos, I think, and to actually make it a more personal story, and I really liked it. I wasn't sure at first, but yeah, it does make sense. He was a god. He's untouchable.
Yeah.
And his arrogance. I rewatched the first 2 Thor films recently, and his arrogance and his self-belief was a thing, and you almost watched his arc has almost been in reverse. He starts off very confident, then he has to find a balance, and then actually he goes into, essentially he's depressed.
Oh, absolutely. He's lost everything, which is why when the scenes with Rene Russo as his mother are so heartbreaking, because he doesn't want her to die. He's already lost everybody, and he doesn't want to see her die again, and this is the day that she dies, and he knows it. And it's that awful moment where she kind of realizes, and she goes, You're not my son that I know, are you? And he goes, come on, I was raised by witches, I know this.
But one of my favourite bits of the whole film is where when he's with his mother, he can still put his hand up and call Mjolnir.
Oh, yes.
And having seen it the first time and knowing I was going to watch it with the family, I made a point of us all watching Thor Dark World, which my daughter hasn't seen. So she'd get whoever has the hammer is worthy, which they talk about a lot in both the first Thor movies. Mm-hmm. And so he caught it, and she turned to me and went, he's still worthy. And I think that's and there's been memes and stuff about it. It's like, yes, your mental state or physical state does not define you, and I think that's that could have been the most contrived kind of right on thing ever. But I thought it was, again, the stuff with his mother, again, watching it multiple times was really, it's very the film, a lot of the film is about parents and children and what loss is, and about mortality.
Yeah.
So to see a god character kind of drawn into all that, yeah.
Doesn't Rocket see him put his hand out? He goes, what are you doing? And he goes, I think his mother says, this sometimes takes a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, that moment where he's got he's got the hammer and Stormbringer the axe, I thought, it is on. It is on.
Yeah, and it doesn't diminish him by lifting up Cap.
No.
This to me that's why I absolutely loved about it is they've always been like a team, but they kind of bicker and they sometimes get on and they sometimes together. But this, when Thor, Cap, and Iron Man walk towards Thanos, just the 3 of them.
Yes.
That hit me right in the feels, as they say these days. It was just like they are a team. They are like best friends, and it's
a callback as well to that scene that the 3 of them fight against each other in the woods.
Yes.
Which was in
the first film.
It was first Avengers film with the trying to get rid of Loki. So it's just. Oh. Yeah, so Thor, I love that. He goes, no, you get the little one. When he gives he gives Mjolnir back to Cap. Because Cap picks up Stormbringer at one point, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Stormbreaker.
And still use it. But it's like, I love the fact that Thor can still kick ass.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess, in the final bit of his arc, in a way, is that he, as Guardians of the Galaxy, it was then announced literally a day after the film came out that he'd signed a new contract to stay.
Right, okay, I didn't know that.
So I think he's going to be in Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Which makes sense.
I think that's the plan.
The hunt for Gamora.
Yeah, yes, the Search for Spock version.
Pretty much, yeah.
But where did she go at the end of the film?
She ran off, she disappeared.
She just, but we didn't see, she was just there and then she wasn't there.
Yeah, it just said missing. So they're going to, Quill has to go and find her now and try and rekindle his love with her.
He just called me a dickhead online.
Meek.
I thought
Korg is hilarious and Meek. Those scenes were great. Okay, so now we come to the big one.
Yes.
Tony Stark, Iron Man. So there's a great moment in the first Avengers film where Cap says to him, you're not the kind of guy that when the moment comes, you jump on the grenade, you lay your life down on the line. That's not you. That's not who you are. And at that moment, he isn't. He
he's
will
not.
help other people.
Yeah.
He does fly the missile through into the other place, the nuclear missile, and save everybody. And that's kind of the start of it, but he still isn't there. And this is that thing of they're crossing over.
He's a narcissist, really.
Absolutely, yes.
He has no humility. That's the big thing, that this film makes him humble.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, really, yeah. I might cry. This is my first time crying not doing a podcast. No, it is. He does. It's and he's not a team player, but he is in this film, and he has to be.
Yeah.
This is like, I mean, because he's been in. No, he's the first.
He's the first. Okay, Robert Downey. They couldn't really get insurance for him when he made Iron Man. He was a massive gamble, and Favreau set the tone of the films and the Marvel Universe. And the Russo brothers said that moment at the end of the film, or the first one, where he's trying to fob it off, and then he kind of goes, puts down the cards and just goes, I am Iron Man. And he said, right, that's one of the moments that they were like, this is the kind of thing that we want to get involved with. This is the kind of film and universe that we want to play in. And it was that massive a gamble on lots of different things. And he's gone from that to 10, 11 years later to being probably the biggest movie star in the world on the biggest franchise in the world.
Yeah, I mean, if you told people now that had grown up just seeing this, he was in trouble for drugs and he had guns in the back of his car. He'd pretty much been written off as Hollywood's kind of wild child.
Yeah.
You know, go and watch Weird Science, kids. And it's been, his arc as a person has almost mirrored the arc of the character in a way.
Yeah.
It's devastating. It's devastating in a way because they kind of make you think that he's going to die numerous times in this film, and the trailer kind of made you think it, but then it kind of gives you this false sense of security of like, well, he didn't die then, and he didn't die then, but he has come back. And then when it happened, I kind of thought, well, I knew this was going to happen, but I pushed it out of my head.
I didn't know at all.
I think I'd always thought that it might happen because his contract was up and he said he wasn't going to do any more, and if any character would be the bookend, it would be him. But once they kind of started to try, I thought, you've made us all think that maybe he's coming back. But it was it is. He's doing exactly what you just said that he said he would never do, which is he is the one falling on the grenade because he knows. He looks at Doctor Strange,
and Strange gives him the same signal.
To say this is the one chance that the universe has got. So, and it's devastating because they give him a little kid.
Because in Endgame, he said he has that dream at the start. And I thought, and then because he says to Pepper, is it true? Are you pregnant? She's like, no. And then, of course, 5 years later, they've got little Morgan running around. And his dream came true. Yeah. But
he has a child who inexplicably has a really strong New York accent despite living in the woods.
Yeah. But the fact that he has everything he's always wanted, he has a quiet life with his wife and a child.
Yeah.
The problem is, there's the weight of everything that was lost. Now, it's not his fault. It wasn't purely his fault. But the one motivating thing, the thing that he can't give up and just move on past, is the death of Peter. Yeah. Because he brought Peter into Civil War. This kid in Queens who was just protecting his neighborhood. He brought him in. And
got him killed.
When Pete died, it absolutely broke him. You could see that he was just completely shattered by it. And so he has that picture, because once Cap is gone, he takes that picture off the windowsill in the kitchen. I was like, who is that? And then you see it and you go, it's still haunting him. It's still haunting him after all this time. And that's why he turns around and says he'll do it.
One of my favourite of the many callbacks is actually within the film. So when they've come and they've planted the seed with him, and I think in a way, watching it a second time, Cap probably knew that Tony would say no, but would eventually turn up. Because of the way he is. If you present him with a problem, he's going to solve it because that's how his mind works. So his whole thing, he's up in the night as he always has been. And when she tells him, I've given up trying to stop you, that was the only thing I've ever failed at is trying to stop you. But I don't need to stop you because you won't be, you can go to bed, but you won't be able to rest. And then when he dies, she literally says, you can, and he's dying, she says, you can rest now. That was the bit that hit me with a lump in the throat.
Oh, yeah. And just is that callback again where Peter's tone goes, Mr. Stark, and this happened, Mr. Stark. Oh, that was heartbreaking as well. Tom Holland is so good. He's just so good in all of his scenes with Robert Downey. And they said they worked really hard to get the character of Spider-Man into the MCU. And then when they pushed really hard to get Tom Holland as well, And he said every time he's in a scene with Robert Downey, he just brings it so much because you have to be when you're acting against Robert Downey. So,
I mean, I was really skeptical when they were going to then bring Spider-Man in, and I was like, "Well, there's been 5 Spider-Man films already, different people, and it feels like I'm really against the idea of the X-Men joining this universe, even though I know they will. I'm really against it, but." I was so against that, and Spider-Man is a character I've read the longest since I was like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And you look, but actually they've done it perfectly. I've just wiped the other films from my memory completely. Although I enjoyed some of them, They
didn't do another origin story. We didn't need it. It didn't have to go into that. We get the story where in that moment where he talks to in Civil War. That's his origin. We find out how he gets his powers, what he did, how he helps his neighborhood. Job done in 5 minutes instead of an hour and a half, 2-hour film. We don't need to know it all over again. He invented the web fluid, all this sort of stuff. So here's the interesting twist. So at the very end, when he snaps his fingers, do you know that originally he didn't say anything in the script?
No, didn't. Okay.
So originally Thanos says, "I am inevitable," and Iron Man just clicks his fingers. And that was it. And they always were like, yeah, it's good, but we're not quite sure. So January 2019, this year, they did reshoots. One of them was this moment. When they were editing, Russo's editing this last part of the film, it was the editor who sat there with them. I can't remember his name now, unfortunately. And they were talking about, he needs to say something, And the guy said, well, why don't you just have him call back to what he says in the original film, which is right at the end of the very first film. And he goes, you know what? I am Iron Man. And they were like, that's it, it's perfect. So they called Robert, and he was like, well, I'm working on this other film, I'm prepping for that, I'd have to regrow the beard, and he didn't want to really do it, but they're like, we need you to come back and redo just for this bit. So he did, he regrew the beard, he came back, and they redid that last moment with the snap, where he says, I am Iron Man. And that sound in the credits isn't anything other than a callback. That's all they've said it is. It's not something new. It's not because...
Yeah, because there was an element of people going, oh, is it Ironheart?
No, it's not. They've said it is the end. It was a callback because he started the franchise. He ended Thanos, and that's all it was. So it made a lot of sense. But for him to say that, it was like, of course that's what he would say. Of course it was.
The other thing as well, like, and again, you could say it's contrived because so many things like this happened, but it wasn't. When he goes back and sees his dad...
Yes.
And bearing in mind that his dad wasn't the best father, he was always working. He's almost become a version of him, but now he's got a kid. And him giving his own father parenting advice.
Hilarious.
And then hugging him. Yeah. It was beautifully done. Very funny.
Yeah, so he goes from this narcissist into a guy who will jump on the grenade and save lives. And he's willing to sacrifice everything for other people. And ultimately he does it, knowing what it will cost him because it is the only one chance that we have to beat Thanos. It was a perfect end for that character. And I think if they really wanted to, he could still be around a little bit, because at the end we see him talking after he's dead, and it's an AI projection. And he's recorded others in the past, like he did at the very beginning of the film. He's talking to Pepper, saying, you know, when I fall asleep, I'll be thinking of you. And it's scanned his whole image. So if they really wanted, you could have him as an AI version talking and every now and then cameoing. But I don't know if they'll even do that at this point.
And I wonder, it would be a nice surprise if he's left a message for Peter.
Yeah.
In the next Spider-Man. Because they've said the Spider-Man film is the end of this. Is the end of the Infinity Saga is that film. Yeah. It's a clever way to make everyone go and see it, but also I think it genuinely will be like a part of the bookend from what we've seen from the trailer.
It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. There's only 2 moments that I didn't like in the film, but they weren't enough to spoil it. We kind of touched on them already, so it's fine.
Yeah.
But apart from that, it wasn't enough to spoil it. And for me, I don't think the Marvel Cinematic Universe will ever reach this height again, even with new characters and new threats, and they start planting things. I don't think it'll ever get to this level again. No,
I think you're right. I think because, in a way, this wasn't planned, but it organically became something, and then once it did, they put a plan on it. Yeah, I think you're right. There's a little part of me going, this is it. Maybe I should just step away from these films now. I won't be doing that.
No,
but there's an
I know what you mean. I feel that a bit as well.
It's such a perfect end. You kind of almost don't want to... You don't want the tipping point where stuff starts to be not as good.
Yeah.
And even though there have been missteps in some of the movies, the quality level has been consistent. And now, I say, going back and watching Iron Man 2, going back and watching Thor: The Dark World, films that weren't as well received, but there were still scenes in there that had a vital part on the film we've just watched. So it all ties together. It's it's to be able to do cinema in a way that's closer to TV and actually even closer to comics is kind of, it baffles my mind really how they've done it, and none of it feel forced.
Yeah. So the film currently stands worldwide box office of $2.3 billion. It's now number 2 film of all time after Avatar, and I think it may edge Avatar out by the time it finishes.
It's about 400 million, which is obviously an awful lot of money, but considering how rapidly it's... And these films do well because of multiple views.
True.
I'd go and see it again. To be honest, if they kept this in the cinema all year and I had the time and money, I'd just go and watch it every Saturday morning.
So I've only seen it once. I do actually want to see it again. So it's
so much.
It's still playing. It is still playing, remember. So I think it will...
Well, no, it's only, let's not forget, it's only 2.5 weeks into its run. So it's... Even on a normal cycle of a film, it's like 4, 5, 6 weeks, and then really popular big films might get 12 weeks. So I think it'll rinse through it.
Yeah, I think it'll break the box office and get number 1, and I'm not sure how long it'll stand, but I think it's going to be a long time before anything breaks that again.
And Zoe Saldana gets to be number 1 and number 2.
Of course, yes, she was in Avatar and Avengers. So... Yeah, really, really interesting, the fact that it's right up there, and it's knocked Titanic into the iceberg once more.
Nice message from James Cameron. Did you see that? He sent him a well done. He sent him a Kevin Feige a well done and a thoroughly deserved message.
Oh, nice. Because he currently had 1 and 2 before that, didn't he? Avatar and Titanic.
I'm not convinced that Avatar and Titanic 2. There is really no need for that film.
It's still crashed.
They've pulled it back up. Yeah. I don't see personally Avatar 2, 3, and 4 troubling these numbers, but you never know.
So.
You never know.
No, I don't think it will. But it was so unique, the first one. But we'll see.
Yeah.
So, anything else you want to say, or do you want to go to some scores?
Hail Hydra. No, that was the other moment we haven't mentioned is the lift thing, because it felt like it was going to be a throwback to the fight. But
so
happening.
They said the reason he didn't do it is that he realised there was a better way. Instead, because he'd evolved, and that's why he said it. And they also said it was a call to the comics as well, because Cap is sort of a thing. The other moment I didn't realise this is that Robert Redford and a bunch of other people came back to film little extra moments. This was after they filmed it. Redford came to the Russo brothers and said, "Yeah, I'm retiring after this. This is the last bit of acting I'm doing on camera."
Wow.
So he'd done Old Man and the Gun, which is a film that I think he also directed.
Everyone kind of thought, it was his last film. Yeah.
And he said at that point he was retiring, but he filmed this for them. He came in, did like a day, and then he said to them, I'm done now. So that was it. That was his last moment you'll ever see on camera, which I thought was quite spectacular as well. And there's a guy who's been in so many amazing films.
But I think this is far more worthy than Sean Connery's career ending with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah, let's be honest.
He needs to come back and just be in anything, really.
He should have done The Matrix. He really should have. But, Okay.
So they're making another Matrix film, aren't they?
Oh, really?
Yeah, or in the universe. The Wachowskis announced yesterday.
Okay, let's not stick on that. Let's stick on a positive note.
Yeah, sorry.
Let's go to some scores, Pete.
Shut up, you idiots. It's time to give a score. Do it. Do it now.
Shall I go first?
Go on, then.
Okay. So, I've been a Marvel fan for the majority of my life.
Yep.
Starting with, like, Spider-Man and the Amazing Friends cartoon. I used to watch the Spider-Man TV show, the Hulk TV show, although it petrified me. But I loved that program. I still now, if I'm a little bit upset, I'll still sling my coat over my shoulder and walk off with that theme in my head. There's a photo of me and my dad when I was about 5, and I had a Hulk T-shirt on. So it literally these characters have been part of my life.
Printed on you, Pete.
I know, for a long time. Secret Wars was the book that made me aware of the whole Marvel universe, and I always wanted them to do that as a film. I don't anymore, because this has done the same job in a way.
Right.
It's kind of taken these things and pulled it together. So for me, this isn't just 21 films and this is the 22nd film. This is my entire life of fandom, and actually giving the ending that you don't get in the comics. Watching this one, it reminded me how whoever does the casting for the Marvel movies deserves some sort of accolade or a large amount of money, because everyone is perfectly cast. I know people do get a bit about Hawkeye, but like to me, every single character is the right person in their role. Like Paul Rudd is amazing as Ant-Man because he's funny, but he's got the pathos, and they've all been really, really good. And even regardless of how small a person's part is, they've been the right person. The soundtrack is phenomenal, wonderful callbacks to the earlier films. We haven't talked that much about the action scenes, ironically, but the action scenes are great in here, but they do the job they need to do. You get the amazing 70s Stan Lee cameo, which makes me want a TV show about him with Mark Maron in the part, but we'll see. He looks so much like him. The character work is consistent. Like we said, every single character had an arc that worked. And it was like reading 12 issues of a comic, not just going to a movie. It's still, my head is still reeling from it after 2 viewings. We're not allowed to give 6 bags because we only have 5. So I would if I could, but I know that this would be the last ever episode if I did. So I'm just going to give it a very large 5 bags, but slightly overflowing.
Okay. So we've gone through a lot. There's still a lot more about the film that we haven't. Again, as you said, ironically, we didn't talk about any of the action scenes because they're all amazing. They're all so good, and just so many payoffs within the battle scenes as well. I really loved it for the character arc. As much as I enjoy the action, that was all great. The film was 3 hours. It didn't feel like it, which was quite surprising because once the film gets going after the kind of 25-minute mark and it becomes almost like this time heist thing, it doesn't stop because it jumps from point to point to point. You can't really catch your breath. I love how they wrap up Cap's story. Cap's my favourite character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and probably in the Marvel comics as well. He has been for a long time. Winter Soldier, I'm excited to see what happens with him because he's a favourite when they go forward with Falcon becoming Captain America and all of that. As you said, the actors, everyone was pitch perfect. There's going to be good stuff coming forward, but I think this may have peaked, and it was an incredibly impressive feat of what they've managed to accomplish over all of the films, and then this like the perfect end cap. So I have to give it 5. For the niggles that I've had, the small niggles, they weren't enough to stop me enjoying this film and coming out with a massive grin on my face and a desperate need to go and watch it again now.
Yep.
So absolutely
you should go straight there. You should go straight to the cinema now. Do not pass go. Do not collect £200.
Just going to go.
Yeah.
Podcast is going to end abruptly as I just stop recording and run out.
Yeah, just run off. I'm going to the cinema.
Anyway, so this was a special episode just because we really wanted to talk about it. Have you seen it? What were some of your favourite moments? Comment below.
I hope you've seen it.
Let us know.
I hope you've seen it.
Well, we've written spoilers all over this, so if you've listened to this and you haven't seen it, whoops.
You're a fool.
You're a fool. You're a fool. In the words of Mr. T. All right, Pete, wrap us up.
Thank you for listening, if indeed you still are. And
Goodbye.
Goodbye, Tony. Goodbye, Tony.
Goodbye, Tony.
You have been listening to Bags of Action.